Tonight on the Late Debate, footing the bill for a bigger military. As Labour carves out a bigger slice of military spending, can Britain keep up with the shifting world order?
It is incredibly important that we, as a nation, recognise that the Americans are our #1 ally, not just in terms of defence, in terms of intelligence sharing, information sharing, business and trade.
Also tonight, trouble brewing over how the Chancellor might cut Britain's benefits bill with the prospect of a big Labour rebellion. And is working from home doing more harm than good to London's economy?
For any team, I think there's stronger collaboration, information sharing, and just greater efficiencies in working together if you're all together in person.
Hello and welcome to the Late Debate. The war in Ukraine has weighed heavily on political minds since Donald Trump became president. After American aid was temporarily scaled back, Downing Street can't afford to waste time working out Britain's role in world security and how the country pays for it. In a moment, I'll be discussing that with my guests from Labour, the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats. But first, the war has given the Defence Committee a lot to scrutinise. Earlier, I asked its chair, the Labour MP for Slough, Tan Dhesi, about JD Vance's apparent slur on British veterans, whether military recruitment is too woke, and what difference spending 2.5% of GDP will have on Britain's forces.
I think it's important that while the number itself is important to give an overall context, we mustn't get fixated just on a number. It's not just about percentages, but it's also about capabilities. How that money is spent, ensuring value for money, that's where the Defence Committee will also be looking into. We've seen what is happening in Ukraine, some of the innovations coming from there, especially in terms of drones and so forth. That, I think, is important that we tap into all of that.
30 years ago, London had 10 army bases. It's got about half that now. Do we need to restore those, or is that old-fashioned thinking?
What worked 10, 20 years ago is not what will work now. So the military itself needs to be agile.
Do you think London, as a capital city, needs special measures against rogue states?
There has been a lot in terms of hybrid threats. Our Defence Committee...
But what do you mean by a hybrid threat?
Hybrid threats are those things happening underneath the threshold. Whether it's in terms of undersea cables, whether it's in terms of ransomware, these are the sort of issues that the Defence Committee has been looking into. As I said on the floor of the House, if we do not commit to defending our country, if we don't have that credible deterrent, it's a lot more costly, notwithstanding the human costs, a lot more costly to fight a war than it is to have a credible deterrent force.
Do you think we can still rely on America as a major ally?
It is incredibly important that we, as a nation, recognise that the Americans are our #1 ally, not just in terms of defence, in terms of intelligence sharing, information sharing, business and trade. Millions of jobs in the UK and across the pond are dependent on that close, special relationship between the UK and the US.
Will it survive?
It stood the test of time.
Does Britain need an independent nuclear deterrent that doesn't rely on America?
Our nuclear deterrent has been heavily invested in over the decades, and as I said, it is important to have that credible deterrent. I am pretty confident that our close relationship with the US will prevail the test of time. We've got to continue working on that regard, but I know that there are also discussions happening with the Europeans, with the French. The German Chancellor-elect Merz, he's also intimated that he would like assistance from France and the UK in terms of providing that nuclear protection as well. That, I think, is where we need to be increasing the collaboration rather than having a fracturing of the NATO alliance, because that would only benefit our adversaries, especially Russia at this time.
What did you make of Vice President Vance's remarks that an Anglo-French deployment to Ukraine, he likened it to 20,000 troops from some random country that has not fought a war in 30 or 40 years?
Well, I believe he has since clarified his remarks that he wasn't referring to the UK or France. Look, for anybody out there to suggest that our brave servicemen and women who fought in various conflicts, whether it's the Falklands. I went to visit the Falklands recently, whether it's there, whether it's in terms of their contributions in Iraq, Afghanistan, working with allies, including the US. I think that we here would see that as very, very offensive and disparaging of those incredible sacrifices. And that's why I know that that is not a view held by the US administration, and we need to ensure that we respect those that made or were willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for our nation's security, but also to global security.
You mentioned recruitment. We hear that the RAF has had to have a rethink about the way it hires trainee pilots. It's not got the right people. What's gone wrong there?
We need to ensure that morale is high, that there was a decrease in morale within our armed forces. There have been other issues uncovered in terms of sexism, in terms of racism. We had the issues around the tragic case around Gunnar Bexley as well. So there are various things at play where the Ministry of Defence needs to ensure that we don't just have policies, that they implement those changes which they have promised to the likes of the Defence Committee.
The criticism is that the MOD has gone down a woke road too far.
Well, look, I know that there are various people that might refer to different things. We need to ensure that everybody, regardless of their gender or their background or colour or creed, that they are valued part of that defence community.
How did you get interested in defence?
My great-grandfather lost a leg fighting in the First World War. My grandmother's brother and other fought in the Second World War. Sikhs, as you know, have a huge military tradition. The likes of me have grown up on those stories. For example, my cousin's grandfather used to narrate stories to us about how he's served in the Middle East, in North Africa during the Second World War. But in addition to that, since becoming a parliamentarian, I've also graduated from the Royal College of Defence Studies, been involved in many, many other discussions, because I think it's important for all MPs, in fact, to have a knowledge of how our defence operates, because there is no point in us making those decisions if they're not well informed.
Joining me now to discuss that are my guests this week. From Labour, the MP for Uxbridge and South Ruislip, Danny Beales. For the Conservatives, the Romford MP, Andrew Rosindell. And from the Liberal Democrats, the MP for Guildford, Zoe Franklin. Welcome, all of you. Danny, when it comes to defence spending, the Prime Minister's been pushed into this, hasn't he? It's Donald Trump pulling Keir Starmer's strings.
I don't think that's fair at all. I think that the Labour manifesto committed to get to 2.5% of GDP. It's something that the last government unfortunately didn't do within 14 years, and we've managed to commit to that in a few months in office. And you know, we are seeing unstable times. People are very worried about what events in Europe and the globe mean for UK and global security. And I think it's right that now we make tough decisions to cut money elsewhere, to invest in our armed forces, to have the capabilities that they need to keep us safe.
Andrew, we remember David Cameron cozying up to Putin at the 2012 Olympics, going to the judo together. Did the last government stick its head in the sand when it came to the threat from Russia?
I think a lot of mistakes have been made by this government and the last government. I think cutting defence has always been a mistake. I don't think there was ever really a peace dividend. And I think that cutting back on our armed forces, we're now paying the price for that. So if you don't have strong defence, we will have greater threats. And the current government are now forced into increasing spending on defence very quickly. We weren't expecting it to happen that fast. And I do think the President of the United States has played a part in this. But we need to go further. We need to get to 3%. And that's what my party is committing to.
Zoe, echoing what Andrew said there about Donald Trump forcing the hand here, is there anything about his approach that you can admire?
President Trump appears to be a deeply unreliable partner, and I respect what Tan said. But I think when we look at the last couple of weeks, you have seen some very changeable approaches to global politics from President Trump. And I've been really proud to be in a party with our leader, Ed Davey, taking a really firm stand on the fact that we need to stand up to Donald Trump. We also need to work with him, of course, but we also need to become closer with our European allies on the issue of defence, and specifically supporting our allies in Ukraine.
The Prime Minister has to play the diplomat, but do you personally find anything about Donald Trump's rhetoric as distasteful?
Well, look, I think we've always played that crucial role in the UK of bridging European partners and the US. We always have, and I think it's vital that we continue to do that. I don't think we should give up.
So you haven't got a bad word to say about President Trump?
Oh, not at all. I mean, look, I think much has been said before about comments that he and many politicians in the US or the UK, for that matter, have said. But I think rather than getting into a tittle-tattle or looking at individual tweets, it's right that the Prime Minister and our Parliament focus on our important strategic relationship with the US and deepening that when we've got incredibly uncertain times globally.
What do you think about President Trump's approach?
Well, I think it's refreshing. I don't agree with everything he says, and he's not really a politician. He's more of a businessman.
Okay, which bit's refreshing?
Trying to sort
aid
out
from Ukraine?
I think what he's doing, he's making countries that have been complacent start to be realistic. For instance, Europe. Europe has been a catastrophe. The European Union have meddled in defence for a long time. Have tried to. They've failed. They're not putting the money into defence that they should be. It's all about Germany now asking to be more involved, but they haven't paid their way for a very long time. It's always been Britain and America, and to be fair, the French, that have invested money in the defence that we need to look after Europe. I'm very pleased that because of what's happening, other countries in Europe are now willing to pay their way. But frankly, the EU should butt out. NATO is our first point of defence, not the European Union.
OK, let's talk about a different form of spending, because Chancellor Rachel Reeves has got a lot to juggle when it comes to balancing the books, and not just with defence. The amount being paid on benefits is rising sharply, which means likely cuts to the welfare bill, which worries many of Labour's own MPs. This week, the Minister for Disability, East Ham MP Stephen Timms, said he wanted to get more people back into work.
And a big part of the challenge is to build a thriving, inclusive labour market that works for as many people as possible, spreading opportunity, supporting disabled people, people with health impairments who have been excluded in the past. We've set a target, an 80% rate of employment. That would be the biggest it's ever been. Set that target in the Get Britain Working White Paper last year. If we're going to hit that, we do have to reduce the disability employment gap.
Danny, we hear MPs, backbench MPs, are being called into Number 10 for a pep talk. Are you one of them?
I have gone in. It was not for a pep talk. It's for a sharing, really, of the situation that we've been left by the last government, which is, to be frank, not sustainable. If we continue on the path we are, by the end of this Parliament, we'd see about £70 billion being spent on out-of-work benefits. 1 million young people now have been left out of education, employment and training. And I don't find that an acceptable position. I think every young person and every person should be supported if they can to get into work. And I think it's just a shame that the last government didn't take the opportunity to reform the welfare system.
So you're not going to be a Labour rebel?
Well, look, I think we need to protect those with disabilities who cannot work. They need to be protected. That's fundamental. But there are lots of people who contacted me who want to work, but to be frank, the system at the moment doesn't help you work. It just parks you on disability benefits once you've fought to get them and provides you no support to get back into the labour market.
Does he sound like a Conservative?
Well, I think there's something you're missing, which is actually the fact that we need to be investing in the NHS. We need to be addressing the social care crisis, because if you're not doing that, you're not empowering to get people back into work. And cutting the welfare spend, yes, we need to find a more sustainable approach to welfare, but it doesn't come by cutting welfare first. It comes investing in the NHS, the mental health support that people need.
But we are doing that. We've invested 22 billion in the NHS. Waiting lists have come down for 4 months in a row.
And
we're employing a lot more work coaches to help people back into work. So I guess what would the Lib Dems do to bring down the welfare bill from 70 billion in 5 years?
But an important part of this is actually the social care element. And the Prime Minister has said very clearly it's going to take 3 years to investigate what the solution to social care is, when we've had multiple reports that have set out very clear indication of the roadmap that needs to be followed. We want to see the report being delivered at the end of the year so that we can have a solution to the social care crisis. And that's
Andrew,
crucial.
Are these cuts you secretly admire? A Conservative government couldn't have got away with them.
Oh my goodness, we shouldn't have allowed this to get to the state it's got. We're talking about 10% of people are now on benefits. Before the pandemic, it was 7.5%. We're talking about an extra 12 billion on benefits since the pandemic. Do you know the pandemic did a huge amount of harm? It actually meant a lot of people decided they're going to work from home, they're going to claim disability benefits, and now all we're doing is spending huge sums of money that we don't have.
We're going to talk a bit more about
the
pandemic
costs.
Shortly, but can I just ask you, Danny, you didn't come into Parliament to cut benefits for the most needy.
I came into Parliament to make sure that people on benefits have the support they need to get into work. You know, my mum, single parent, worked all her life. She unfortunately was disabled for a period when breaking her back, and she needed support, and that support needs to be there for people in those situations. But she could get back into work, and she did eventually with support. And there are millions of people in this country, actually many people with disabilities, say, I might be able to try work. I want to try educational training. We shouldn't just park people on benefits for life. It's not good for them. It's not good for society. It's not financially sustainable. We need to provide more active support, and we need to change the welfare system.
What would the Lib Dems do?
So I'm actually going to take a moment to agree with you on the element of actually there needs to be a greater investment in the work to support people back into work. I did a fantastic visit fairly recently in my own constituency, and I met an organisation that works with employers to talk through actually how do you support someone who's seeking to go back into work. So an investment into that is absolutely crucial. But what we see is also that when you're investing in the welfare spend, so many people end up going to appeal, getting their benefit reinstated. So I think there's a whole question mark about the approach that's been taken.
But the system will never work if we're so generous with benefits and people feel that their lives are easier just to be on benefits. There's no doubt there are genuine people that need support, and I'm always going to support people that are genuine. But we all know that a lot of people play the system, and I think that we need to be quite radical about this. It is unsustainable to continue to spend the level of welfare that we're spending, and we're teaching people actually not to bother to work. And I don't think we can do that anymore. The country needs to radically change the benefit system.
OK, can I pause you there for a moment and ask you to cast your mind back 5 years?
From this evening, I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home.
So much changed so quickly as the government worked out how to control the spread of COVID. For many, it meant working from home, a policy which looks like it's here to stay despite the best efforts of businesses to get workers back to the office.
Personally, I think in-person interaction really, really helps a lot. It's clearly beneficial to new joiners. It's really helpful to people who are early on in their careers and so who are looking to develop and try and learn from colleagues or from people who have more experience from them. And then even without new joiners, for any team, I think there's stronger collaboration, information sharing, and just greater efficiencies in working together if you're all together in person.
Zoe, do you find a lot of your constituents very happy that they don't have to commute into London from Surrey?
Yeah, so there's a balance to be had. I speak to a lot of people who are very happy that the fact they can go into the office perhaps 3 days a week and then work from home other days. And that brings a positive element to your work-life balance, but it's also really helpful for people who are perhaps juggling families as well. So I think it's really important to remember that businesses are showing that you can have flexible working, you can have good working from home practices that work for businesses. So I don't think having a blanket approach is helpful, but it also helps people get back into work who might otherwise be unable to make it work.
Andrew, Sadiq Khan says he's worried about the centre of London being hollowed out. Transport for London estimates still around 500,000 commuters a day haven't returned to public transport. Was lockdown a mistake?
Yes, it was. I voted against all the lockdowns, except the first one, because we didn't know what we were facing. But all the others afterwards were an extreme reaction to something which we are suffering from today. So many of our problems we're facing today are because of all the lockdowns that went on for nearly 2 years. We need to get Britain working again. We need to get London working again. It's affecting people's mental health. It's affecting businesses. It's affecting people actually going and doing things in London and spending their money. We need to regenerate activity. And this attitude that, oh, we can just work from home, I just think it's wrong. I think Jacob Rees-Mogg had the right idea with the civil servants saying, you know, come back to work. And I think there should be a culture of everyone should be at work, interacting with their work colleagues and actually showing they're doing things, because working from home, I think, is isolating people and it's not good for anybody.
Is it time to get the civil service back to work?
Well, I think, they are, and, I think it's quite an old-fashioned...
Back into the office?
I think, the reality is most people are in the office most of the time. I think we've kind of, come back probably to a norm where most people are in 3 or 4 days in the office across a broad range of sectors in the economy. I think employees often now expect, to be honest, when they're job hunting, a level of flexibility that might not have been the case 20 years ago. And if you're an employer not offering flexibility, to be frank, you're going to lose out on quite good people. And we talked in the previous discussion about how we support more people with health conditions and disabilities into work. And I think flexibility is going to be key for those. So to just say blanket, everyone always has to be in every day, is going to exclude a lot of people, a lot of parents, a lot of carers from the workforce too.
This number of people, particularly young people, who are finding it very hard at the moment, this is a legacy of lockdown, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a whole generation of young people who, because of lockdown, missed out on face-to-face education. There's clearly huge problems around mental health. But that isn't instantly solved by forcing people to come back to the office. Actually, it's about providing mental health support, which I think is currently in a really bad place as a nation, and we need to invest in that. And it's recognising that actually flexible working, as you've rightly said, helps people who perhaps can't make it into the office 5 days a week, but can do that balance. And actually, you're right, young people are looking for a different approach to working, but as are people of all ages. People are looking for a better work-life balance, and actually employers, so many employers recognise that actually you can make space for people to work from home, work flexibly, while also having the office, and that brings a lot to a business.
Isn't it true that people in this part of the world do have a tough time when it comes to work-life balance, simply because they have to commute such long distances?
Well, some people do, but the distances aren't always that long. I mean, we have wonderful transport links throughout the Greater London and the wider region. But the reality is that everyone must understand that we're only going to have a strong economy and pay for public services if everyone's seriously working. All this about work-life balance, I accept that there is a need to consider that, but we want to be a wealthy country. We don't want to be poor. And if people don't go to work, and if people think, well, we'll stay at home, let's not worry too much about it. We're making ourselves poor.
And I think we talk about work-life balance, but that's people looking after their children, dropping off at nursery, looking after
Danny,
an elderly relative.
Self-employed people don't have this privilege.
It's not sticking your feet up watching Netflix.
No,
it's actually doing important things for the economy.
If you're working
in all
for the local
senses.
council or you're working for a government department and public sector, you can do it. But if you are someone that's trying to run a business, trying to earn an honest living, you have to get up early, you have to work hard. That's how Britain was made strong, because we were entrepreneurs, people seeking enterprise.
Before the internet, before creative services.
And because of the pandemic, it's changed the culture. But we will be poorer because of it if we don't change that culture back to what we used to be.
I think it's a really problematic characterisation, this idea that if you work from home...
Zoe, sorry to interrupt you, but it's time for us all to go and work from home, because I'm afraid we've run out of time. That is all the time we have time for tonight. Thank you to my guests Tan Dhesi, Danny Beales, Andrew Rosindell and Zoe Franklin. We're back next month. Until then, goodbye and thank you for watching. Sorry to interrupt you.